no journalist got into the industry because they wanted to be copying and pasting material between systems. Challenge is, how do we produce more for more outlets in more formats than ever?
Where you have that data underneath that understands kind of the content, the workflow, and the person. To solve that as a single pane of glass is a really hard problem to solve.
Hi and welcome to Making the Media. My name's Craig Wilson and we've got a bit of a twist in our next few episodes. We're going to be taking you to the heart of the action from the recent NAB show in Las Vegas and sharing some of the sessions from the Avid main stage, kicking off with a focus on news. So at the show I was lucky enough to moderate a few panels, and the first is with the Chief Technology Officer of the international news organisation ITN, Jon Roberts. He was joined on stage by Avid's Chief Product Officer, Kenna Hilburn, to talk all things news. So we talked about story-centric, we talked about the balance of digital and linear coverage, cloud and hybrid workflows, and more. But let's start with Jon outlining the work which ITN does, particularly with ITV News in the UK.
So ITN, we're based in London. We celebrated our 70th anniversary last year. We are an independent production company who specialise in news and factual. What makes us unusual is we have long-standing relationships with the three commercial PSBs in the UK, so ITV, Channel 4 and Channel 5. We have a particularly close relationship with ITV as our biggest customer, and we work really closely with them, not just as the supply partner for news, but having had a 70-year relationship, we have deeply integrated technical strategies as well.
And on a daily basis, what's the kind of output that you're doing?
Yeah, so for in broadcast terms, we produce 7 hours of tier one commercial PSB broadcasting a day for ITV. Digital, of course, has gone from being a smaller part of the newsroom output to now a huge part of the daily work, with around 7 billion views on social last year for ITV News alone. So we go from the breakfast news all the way through to our flagship news at 10. And ITV News also operates a regional network. So they operate 12 regions in and of themselves, but we operate the London region. So we are the national, so we're the breakfast producer, the national news producer, and the London regional producer for ITV News.
And international bureaus as well, covering news across the globe.
Yep, absolutely.
Yep. So tell us how important collaboration is. It's a complex operation that you have. Tell us how important collaboration is to make sure that you have the tools to tell the best stories.
I think at every level, it's almost the most significant unlock we can find in terms of getting value out of our teams, because, I don't think we're alone. The macro kind of forces at the moment, the challenge is, how do we produce more for more outlets in more formats than ever? And the only way we're going to be able to do that is A, make it easier for any individual to work with the tools to do that, but crucially, how do we collaborate? So for example, in that regional network example with ITV, across that regional network, we are far more powerful than any individual newsroom. But in order to be able to unlock that power, we need to make it far easier for people to not only share media, but to be able to share ideas, updates, and work throughout the day. So collaboration and making it easier for those teams to meet in one place couldn't be more important to us.
Yeah, we'll go on to talk about some of the specifics around that as well in a little while. The other question I wanted to ask about, you talked there about ITN being around for 70 years and a long-standing relationship with ITV News as well. You've also been a long-time Avid customer as well.
Yep.
So how important is it to have that partnership approach to how you deliver your technology strategy?
I think it's always been important, right? But I just can't imagine it a moment where it's more important. I think everybody here feels a sense that things are moving at quite a pace, and that pace is likely to accelerate. And in order for us to be able to leverage the new technologies that we expect to come on stream faster and faster, we have a collective challenge, I think, as broadcasters and as vendors, to tell the story of what that new technology can offer, to work with teams to adopt the right technologies, to change workflow. And that is hard yards, right? And not just in newsrooms, that is really hard work. What we need from vendors to be able to do that is much more of a partnership relationship. So we would hope that we have value to offer back to vendors as a smart user of systems, with some smart ideas about workflows and editorial. Equally, we know that our best vendors have some really smart ideas about how they're thinking about their new systems. My experience is the more we have a conversation around that early and ongoing, not just about product roadmap, but change management, delivery, long-term strategy, it benefits both parties.
Yeah, absolutely. Kenna, from your perspective, Avid, again, we're a global company. We work with lots and lots of different customers. How important is partnership from our perspective?
I think what's really interesting about this industry is that, companies like ITN and ITV, you are not only broadcasters and storytellers, but you all are technologists as well. And obviously, the industry has been going through disruption over the last 10 years with kind of the disruption of traditional linear models into the proliferation of digital channels and all of the kind of change and implications that come along with that. And now we have this double disruption that's happening now with the state and the era of AI. And we cannot do it alone as a technology provider. We have to be working in lockstep with our customers to really understand the pain points of what's happening within your organization as you're trying to modernize your technology, as you're trying to change your process around that technology to make sure that what we're building is actually solving the problems that you're trying to solve, because those problems are changing daily.
Yeah, but translating what the capabilities are that you can offer, the whole thing is a complicated conversation that requires partnership. I mean, for me, including internal work, the shorter we can make the gap between the craftsperson, whatever that is, in a dubbing suite, at the end of a camera on a location, in a control room, and the engineer in a vendor who's trying to build the tool, the shorter we can make that, because and historically that's been a long chain. And I think what technology is allowing us to do now is to compress that conversation. There's a huge opportunity in that, but it requires real partnership.
And you're no longer building railroads that are going to last you decades, right? So that, like, I'm really curious, like, how are you thinking about, I'm going to throw you a curveball because this wasn't on the sheet, but like, how are you thinking about making technology choices today, knowing that you're not going to be on this 10-year, 8-year cycle and that it's going to be evolving much quicker?
I think there's two answers to that. I think there's the technology question. There's lots of specifics I could go into the terms of the kinds of technologies we think are key. Broadly, conceptually, we are prioritizing partners who understand A, that things are changing fast and that we want to change with us. B, that we need their systems to play really nicely with everybody else, and that we will be a big part of those conversations. I think in terms of people, we are trying to understand how we can re-engineer our teams to be better equipped to adapt. To be in a permanent state of change management, to have genuinely distributed innovation across our workforce. We think the technology enables that, but there's some hard work to do to be able to be sort of culturally built to be able to be as innovative and as quick as we think we might need to be.
And Ken, I mean, obviously, shows like IBC and NAB, they allow us to meet a lot of customers in a short space of time. But this is something that we're engaged with all the time. We're always speaking to customers. So maybe talk a little bit about that, because the approach to partnership is not just with ITN and ITV, but it's with our whole community.
Yeah, and I think it just goes back to the pace of change, right? Like, we left Vegas last year after NAB, and I didn't see my kids for 3 months because we went on the road, and we had the kind of content core idea and the vision, but we needed to get out in front of our customers and have conversations around, does this solve your problem? Are we thinking about this the right way? Is the sequence in which we're thinking about bringing this to market going to solve your biggest pain points first? And I spent a lot of time on planes over the last year having those conversations. It's really, really valuable to meet you all here and to allow you to see the technology that we have delivered, since last year and get your feedback in real time. But we're having conversations and thinking about, what's not coming next IBC, but NAB next year. And what's coming next year is being shaped by the conversations that we are having today. So it's incredibly valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll come on to talk about Avid Content Core in a little while. But one thing we've been involved in with Jon and some of his colleagues at ITV is producing a film about how ITV News are using Wolftech, which is part of our Avid for News solution, and how it helps on that collaboration piece that we've got. So we've got a video we're going to show you around that. So let's roll in the second video.
We're being tasked with doing more, right? Working with more types of content, delivering that to more publishing points. And the only way we're going to be able to do that is if we can make our people more effective. I'm Jon Roberts, CTO at ITN.
I'm James Webster. I work for ITV News as a reporter for the Content Hub, and I produce items for broadcast on 11 of our regions across England.
My name is Elizabeth Fordham. I've been the strategic planner for the last 10 or so years. So I'm in charge of planning both the next day, programmes and further ahead.
In broadcast, we produce around 7 hours of tier 1 daily news and factual production, starting with the breakfast show with Good Morning Britain all the way through to the flagship News at 10. We're also a region, so the London region for ITV operates out of the same newsroom here, including the main show at 6 o'clock every evening. We produce a lot of digital content. It's one of the more exciting growing parts of the business, a fantastic roster of growing original content, around 7 billion views across ITV News' social media platforms last year. Collaboration is in many ways one of our biggest focuses in terms of our news production system. We are far more powerful together the more we can collaborate, whether that's resource sharing, getting access to the critical picture faster, whether that's just coming up with the best idea for the day. The more we can connect them around the information and the media that they need to work with every day, the better our output will be.
Before we used Wolftech, information was in a multitude of places. Any material which other newsrooms filmed would have been in a Google Doc, hopefully, if it was in the right place. Details of the filming that I was doing might be in an email, it might have been in iNews.
And you couldn't very easily see what other regions were doing. There was no real facility for seeing their planning diaries at all.
So Wolftech is central here to how we're thinking about collaboration, from the moment a story exists through to early ideation and sharing around how we think we might want to tackle that across the network, through to planning and resource deployment, and then ultimately increasingly tying all of that work into the running order or the digital output content.
Wolftech is really important. It will log all of my filming that I'm doing. It will log the requests I've sent out to each newsroom saying what I want them to ask, what footage, what shots I want them to gather. And then that will hold the details they send back to me, so it is all in one place.
We book everybody through Wolftech, booking crews, booking reporters, booking studios for down the lines and booking other resources like that. I think it has brought us together as a team to be able to use Wolftech in that way and plan ahead.
Depending what role you're doing, you will be more interested in different levels of detail about what people are working on. So you can set up your views in Wolftech for the information you need and be able to work out who's working on what, where they are, when they might be back, when you might be able to access that footage or speak to them about what they filmed. And then that extends between newsrooms. So in one newsroom, you might want to know what story they're running today, what they might be working on for tomorrow.
This is what I'm looking at. This is the next day's planning. So we can see the stories that we've got here. This is our North programme. This here is our South programme. Over here, we've got our neighbouring regions. So I can see at a glance what they're planning to do and whether any of their stories will be affecting us and whether I need to factor it in.
Before I set off, the first thing I want to know is where I'm filming. So that will be in Wolftech Go. It will give me a location. It'll tell me if there's parking. It will tell me who I'm going to be seeing. I'll have their contact details. I will have an idea of what we've told them we want to film. Sometimes, if I'm filming something on behalf of someone else, it will have suggested questions they want me to ask. If not, it will have the background information so I can read that before I go out and work out what do I need to ask, how am I going to get the best out of them. And all that information will be on the Wolftech Go app.
I think a lot of reporters don't have much time to get the laptop out and look on there, so it's all done by the app.
And compared to what we had before, it was so disjointed. Now it's on the phone, and if anything's changed while you've been on the way to a job, it's always up to date when you get there.
Our newsroom, like many, was built around a broadcast output, and that's an ever-shifting picture. The digital team are now central to everything we do every day. So with our video production platforms, making sure that we can collaborate across production projects more effectively, the ability for teams to collaborate and share throughout the day is vital as we continue to blend between these worlds of broadcast and digital.
We are so much more organised now because you're not scrabbling around trying to find the information instead, so undoubtedly it feels a more efficient way of working.
Wolftech, in our vision, becomes central to the single pane of glass journey, where we really want to get to a place where all of our users find it more easy to interact with colleagues and with the media and content that we're working with every day.
It does feel like I have more time to be creative rather than looking after logistics.
Yeah, so great, and a big thanks to the teams at ITV in Leeds and in London for putting up with us filming with them for a couple of days. So John, there's a couple of bits from that I wanted to pick up on, and I think is the point that James makes right at the end, where it's enabling teams to be more creative rather than focusing on logistics, and I think that's a really significant part of what something like Wolftech can actually enable that kind of collaboration to do.
Yeah, ultimately, we want more of our journalist work to be happening inside journalist tools producing content and less in coordination emails, message group channels, phone calls, right? And at the moment, no journalist got into the industry because they wanted to be copying and pasting material between systems or because they were trying to manage some complicated logistic task across multiple systems, right? So I think you can see how the feedback from those teams who are working every day is enabling, right? And dropping away some of that complexity and that messiness into how do we have a purer conversation about what's the idea, what's the pitch, who's going, what's that content, how do we get it back? So yeah, it's great to hear that feedback.
And one thing that you said in that film is about a single pane of glass experience. Maybe expand on that and what you mean by that.
I think we're not alone. So we talked about how more complex and how more or the kind of challenges that have been laid onto newsrooms in this new multi-platform environment. We all then have spent 10 or 15 years understanding that we all need to be really agile and we need to have lots of tools. Newsrooms typically like to have best in breed tooling, right? And so what that tends to have ended up in is some very complex environments for people to operate in. And because we want people to be able to move around the newsroom producing content rather than thinking I'm in this team working with this technology because I'm producing digital, and now I'm in this team working with this technology because I'm producing broadcast, on and on. Really, for me at the minute, there's a real quest for simplicity. And I think our staff are used to quite elegant technology interactions in their day-to-day life and what we need to try and bring to them is, with all the complex tooling we can present in our environments, how do we keep giving them that capability, but make the experience of interacting with it a lot more straightforward, right? So a single pane of glass is one way to think about that. I think what that UI looks like and how configurable it is, how user-friendly it is, how it bridges systems, I think is another part of it. But ultimately, the vision for me would be that a journalist starts their day and the question is, okay, what am I working on today? Well, here is my single pane of glass UI that gives me all of that capability. So I'm not context switching. I'm not dragging and dropping between systems. I've got a familiar place to go, whether I'm planning, editing, moving to the control room, digital publishing, one place where everybody can meet that feels a bit more accessible, I think is a really clear vision.
And Kenna, from your perspective, how do you think something like Avid Content Core can begin to get towards that single pane of glass experience that John's referenced?
Yeah, I think I love the conversation around a single pane of glass because it's so visual, right? It's so tangible to think about like what you would want that to look like as like a control surface. But if you think about kind of the end-to-end workflow and all of the complexity that can be involved in that, like to solve that as a single pane of glass is a really hard problem to solve. And one of the things that we are really focusing on for our product strategy is the data and how you have kind of the data around the content and the understanding of what that content is. And then you have the data around the workflow, and that video about how you all are using Wolftech, I think, was a great example of all of the, there's the collaboration tool, there's the kind of structuring of the news gathering process that comes within that Wolftech collaboration suite, to a process that has become incredibly unstructured and chaotic as the rise of digital channels has mounted. So being able to
consolidate that back into a single platform, right?
Yes.
Or at least an
So
excellent experience.
the data around who's working on what and how that content is moving through the pipeline and the understanding of what that content is allows us from a technology provider perspective to be able to curate that application and that your UI based on the persona and based on what their role is within the organization, and only show them the tools that are relevant to them in their day-to-day and in the workflow that they are trying to accomplish that day based on their role, based on the specific story that they are assigned to. I think that is the only way that you can really kind of achieve this utopia of a single pane of glass, is where you have that data underneath that understands kind of the content, the workflow, and the person, and kind of where they are at within their process, and just giving them what they need when they need it, a truly intelligent system.
Yeah, and Jon, what's your view of what Content Core is obviously been launched here at the show itself, what the kind of prospects it has in terms of what it can deliver?
I think it's a really interesting example of, I think for a lot of us coming here to the show, there is a sense that we're looking for the next generation of things, right? That we're expecting some quite significant transformation, because we think the technology available to us all now should be enabling us to think quite differently about how we need to produce things at a time where we're being asked to do different things, right? So for me, Content Core looks like a lot of the things we've just been describing, right? A strong focus on data as the underpinning force. The idea that it's an enabling platform that sits at the core of a lot of workflows, but that, like any really attractive modern platform, it doesn't assume that we have to do everything there, right? So giving you that core of permissioning, security, authorization, audit trails, whilst at the same time providing the single pane of glass experience, I think that's a really compelling offer. I think it being data first, API first, those are things that we've been looking for some time in systems, and for something as critical as a newsroom computer system, or the core content platform in your facility, whatever your work might be, those are the things it needs to start looking like, I think, for us. So I think it's really exciting to see Avid having a bold vision around what that looks like, and we're excited as key partners to keep that conversation going.
Yeah, one other aspect I wanted to talk a little bit about is Wolftech's obviously cloud hosted. It's running in AWS as Content Core is as well. And obviously, your Media Central infrastructure primarily is on-prem, maybe virtualized or a data center, but it's primarily on-prem. What's your view of hybrid workflows in that way? Is that, you think, the direction the industry is headed in?
Well, it's where we are, right? And I think there's a reason why we're there are other parts of the media supply chain that in the last 5 to 10 years have seen significant benefits of cloud, right? If you're in distribution and you've got huge scaling opportunities, then clearly you can get a lot of value out of cloud. If you're closer to live production work and news and sport type work, it's a slightly different question, right? And so where we are now is that, yes, we have lots of services and applications running in the cloud. We have on-prem storage. We have, as you say, private data center, virtualization. It's a full hybrid stack. And ultimately, for me, there is no kind of philosophical purity of let's get to the cloud. There is nothing magic about the cloud. The cloud has a list of benefits. What I think we want to do is, when we're thinking about workflows and platforms, assess those benefits. There are other ways of achieving them as well, right? And ultimately for me, it's the right application for the job, right? And that will be a combination of an equation that includes, resilience and cost and scalability and flexibility. And, and there are times when the cloud is absolutely the perfect fit for that. There are times when a hybrid workflow is more appealing. I think one thing we are looking to progress towards is, since COVID, when we've had to think a lot more about extending our facility beyond the walls of our building, to date, we've been quite remote desktop-y in a lot of the ways that we've achieved that. So I think we want to make sure we're leveraging the cloud in the right places for those workflows. But at the core of the platform, it's an open question as to what the best solution is. And my expectation is that we will have a hybrid looking tech stack for a while yet.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to consider as well, of course, and you talked about change management earlier, Jon, is that there's been a significant investment in your staff, in where they are today and the tool sets that they use. And Kenna, I wanted to ask you a question about that. Is, one of our themes here at the show is helping our customers modernize without disruption. And that's really about helping people utilize and kind of sweat what they have today, but provide them with additional capabilities through products like Content Core.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, the news doesn't stop, right? So you don't have the luxury of being able to stop down for months
Even
at a
when we're
time.
here, it turns out. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Still spinning and do a complete rip and replace, right, of your whole technology stack. So it is our strategic imperative as your partner to ensure that your systems can keep running and we can start to layer on new pieces of innovation on top of that in a user experience that looks like a family member of the tools that your teams already know and understand and are deeply ingrained into the muscle memory, so that they're not having to think about, like, wait, where's the button for this? How do I, like, so that process just becomes seamless, and we're obfuscating whether or not they're working on-prem or whether they're working in the cloud, because the reality is that they're going to be working in both places, but the user doesn't have to think about that. Right, they're just processing their workflow. They're getting their story to air, and we're getting the technology out of the way.
And it's such a key point, right? We I think newsrooms are particularly hard for change because newsrooms tend to be quite mature operations with really well-established workflows. Typically, everyone in a newsroom is super time poor, right? And they've got a deadline. And newsrooms are full of smart people who figure out a way of getting something done, right? Thank God, because that's how we get a lot of content to her. What that means, though, is that you end up with many, many, many organic workflows, and then transitioning to something new is hard work. What I think makes the difference is when that technology becomes far more intuitive, for a start, when it is recognizable, even if it's offering new capabilities to help us bring people on that journey. But there's no doubt for me that at a time when we're expecting capabilities to change quite rapidly, the ability for us to bring our teams through that journey is a really big challenge for us.
So thanks to Jon and Kenna for sharing their views with us. There's a lot to unpack there. Now scan the QR code on your screen now if you want to find out more about Avid's news solutions used by ITV News and many other major news organisations worldwide. Or if you want to learn more about Avid's award-winning Avid Content Core product, it's a big hit of the show, then scan the QR code you can see now. As always, if you're listening to the podcast, then just check out the show notes for all of the links. Now, next time on the show, we're going to be finding out about the new partnership between Avid and Google. This is one of the biggest announcements at the show and includes bringing Gemini's generative AI into Media Composer and Google Search to Avid Content Core, so you do not want to miss out on that. So thanks to Jon and Kenna, but most of all, thanks to you for taking the time to join us. Until next time, from me and the Making the Media team, it's goodbye for now.